At the Yaverland Wildlife Sanctuary, 72-year-old Conrad Harrigan thought he'd seen it all. His most enigmatic teacher was Jasper, a magnificent solitary bobcat. Their morning ritual was the bedrock of Conrad's life. But one day, that universe was thrown into chaos. While the sanctuary's matriarch lioness was in surgery, mournful cubs, and a simple mistake set a terrifying event in motion. A clumsy maintenance worker failed to properly secure the latch on Jasper's enclosure. A gust of wind, a soft metallic groan, and the gate swung open. Jasper, driven by rare curiosity, slipped out. When Conrad discovered the empty habitat, a cold washed over him. He fumbled for his radio, his voice a dry whisper. "It's Jasper. He's gone." The response was immediate horror. Every keeper knew exactly where that service path led. A code red echoed through the sanctuary. Conrad ran, bracing for the brutal, bloody massacre he was sure he would find at the lion enclosure. But when he arrived, there was no fight. What he found wasn't horror. It was something so deeply unexpected, so astonishingly tender, that it would leave seasoned keepers speechless and forever redefine what it means to be wild, and what it means to be family. Conrad Harrigan believed that to understand an animal, you first had to understand its silences. At 72, with knees that forecasted rain more accurately than the local news and a face etched with the fine lines of 1,000 sunrises, Conrad had become a master linguist in the quiet language of the wild. For the past 30 years, the Yaverland Wildlife Sanctuary had been his university, his sanctuary and his home. And his most enigmatic, and arguably his favorite professor was a bobcat named Jasper. Jasper was, in the parlance of the sanctuary, a character. He derived as a ball of fluff and fury, rescued from a wildfire that had claimed his mother. He had grown into a magnificent specimen, a compact body of muscle and sinew, tufted ears that twitched at the secrets of the wind, and eyes the color of old whiskey that held a perpetual look of dignified disapproval. He was the Clint Eastwood of the feline world, solitary, ruggedly handsome, and not given to pointless chatter. Conrad's day, every day, began with Jasper. Long before the first visitors trickled in, Conrad would make his way to the bobcat's spacious habitat, a lovingly crafted slice of North America woodland nestled incongruously in the gentle English countryside. He'd carry a small, dented thermos of tea and a single fragrant sardine. "Morning, you old grump," Conrad would murmur, setting the sardine on a flat rock just inside the enclosure fence. Jasper, who would have been pretending to be asleep on his favorite sun-drenched ledge, would open one eye. He would hold Conrad's gaze for a long, calculating moment, as if weighing the quality of the offering against the sheer audacity of being woken. Then, with a sigh that was pure theater, he would stretch, every vertebra popping in a silent, satisfying sequence. He'd leap down from his perch with the fluid grace of a shadow and approach the sardine, not with haste, but with the measured tread of a king approaching a banquet laid in his honor. He'd eat the fish, then fix Conrad with another look that said, "This is an acceptable start to my day. Do not disappoint me further." This morning ritual was the bedrock of Conrad's life. It was a silent conversation that reaffirmed the order of the universe. But today, the universe had other plans. The trouble began, as it so often does, with a tooth. Not Jasper's tooth, but a tooth belonging to Zola, the sanctuary's matriarchal African lioness. Zola was a queen in every sense of the word, majestic, powerful, and possessed of a rumbling purr that could vibrate through the soles of your shoes. She was also the devoted mother of 4 of the most rambunctious, tumble-prone lion cubs Conrad had ever seen. They were 4 furry cannonballs of boundless energy, collectively known as the Chaos Quartet. A routine checkup had revealed a cracked canine in Zola's jaw, a painful and potentially dangerous affliction. The sanctuary's chief veterinarian, Dr. Evans, had made the call. Zola needed to be sedated and taken to the on-site clinic for a delicate hours-long procedure. This left the Chaos Quartet motherless for the afternoon. "Keep a close eye on them, Conrad," Dr. Evans had said, her brow furrowed with concern. "They'll be disoriented and stressed without Zola. The last thing we need is any more excitement." Conrad had nodded grimly. He knew what she meant. The cubs, Leo, the bold and boisterous one, Amara, the sweet-natured observer, Quito, the shy one who hid behind his own paws, and Nia, the mischievous instigator, were a handful even with their mother's calming presence. Without her, they were a potential 4-way disaster. He'd spent the early part of the afternoon watching them. They weren't playing. They were huddled near the entrance of their large, rocky den, their usual chirps and playful growls replaced by an unnerving, mournful silence. They looked lost, their golden eyes scanning the horizon for the familiar, magnificent shape of their mother. It was, Conrad thought with a pang in his chest, a cruelly heart-wrenching sight. Meanwhile, on the other side of the sanctuary, another smaller drama was unfolding, orchestrated by a well-meaning but hopelessly clumsy maintenance worker named Gary. Gary's superpower was his ability to turn any simple task into a slapstick comedy routine. Today's task was to repair a small section of wire on the outer surface perimeter of Jasper's enclosure. He'd done the job with his usual cacophony of dropped tools and muttered curses, and in his haste to get to his lunch break, he had failed to properly secure the latch on the service gate. It was a heavy iron bolt that needed a firm, final shove to click into place. Gary had given it a gentle nudge. For an hour, the gate held. Then, a particularly gusty British wind, the kind that seems to come from all directions at once, funneled down the service path. It caught the edge of the gate and pushed. The bolt, resting precariously, slid back. With a soft, metallic groan, the gate swung inward. Jasper, who had been enjoying a post-sardine nap, was woken not by the sound, but by a change in the air. A new scent, a cocktail of unfamiliar vegetation and distant, exotic animals, had breached his fortress of solitude. His whiskey-colored eyes snapped open. Curiosity, the one force more powerful than his ingrained grumpiness, took hold. With the silent tread that made him a ghost in his own habitat, he slipped down from his ledge and padded towards the opening. He stood there for a full minute, a statue of tawny fur, his tufted ears swiveling like radar dishes. The world outside his familiar kingdom was a tapestry of new smells and intriguing possibilities. His adventurous spirit, long dormant under layers of routine, stirred. He took a single tentative step, then another. And just like that, Jasper the Bobcat was on the loose. Conrad's own routine was as ingrained as Jasper's. At 3 o'clock, after checking on the lion cubs, he made his way back to the Bobcat enclosure for their second silent meeting of the day. This one involved no sardines, just a shared moment of quiet contemplation. He turned the corner on the path, and his heart stopped. The service gate was ajar. The habitat was empty. For a moment, Conrad's mind refused to process the information. It was like looking at a photograph with the main subject inexplicably missing. Jasper was always there. Always. A cold dread, sharp and sickening, washed over him. He fumbled for his walkie-talkie, his hand shaking so violently he could barely press the button. "Beth," he croaked, his voice a dry whisper. "Beth, come in." Beth, a young, bright-eyed keeper who adored Conrad, responded immediately. "Conrad, what's wrong? You sound awful." "It's Jasper," Conrad said, the words feeling like stones in his mouth. "He's gone. The service gate is open. He's out." The silence on the other end of the radio was heavy with shared horror. Every keeper knew the layout of the sanctuary. They knew which animals were where. And they all knew what lay at the end of the service path that ran past Jasper's enclosure. "Oh, Conrad, no," Beth whispered. "The lion enclosure." Panic lent Conrad's old legs a speed they hadn't possessed in years. He ran, his breath coming in ragged, painful gasps. He could hear Beth on the radio, her voice tight with urgency as she alerted Dr. Evans and the rest of the staff. "Code red, code red, animal containment breach. All staff to the lion enclosure. Repeat, all staff to the lion enclosure now." Conrad's mind was a maelstrom of terrible images. Jasper, so small and proud, facing down 4 lions. Even cubs were lions. They were bigger, stronger. It would be a slaughter, a brutal, bloody massacre of his grumpy, sardine-loving friend. He felt a sob building in his chest, a knot of grief and guilt. He should have checked the gate himself. He should have been there. He burst through the trees into the viewing area for the lion habitat, Beth right behind him. His heart hammered against his ribs, a frantic drumbeat of doom. He braced himself for the carnage, for the sight he knew would haunt him for the rest of his days. But there was no blood. There was no fight. There was something far, far stranger. The 4 lion cubs were there, in the middle of the open grassy area, near the base of a large man-made baobab tree. And they were not snarling or attacking. They were hopeful. Their bodies were wriggling with a kind of desperate, excited energy. Their little tails, usually so playful, were twitching with anticipation. And they had formed a tight, living circle around a small, terrified, and utterly bewildered bobcat. Jasper was frozen solid. He was pressed against the base of the tree, his body coiled as tight as a spring, his back arched and his fur standing on end, making him look twice his normal size. His ears were flat against his skull, and a low, guttural growl rumbled in his chest. He was a cornered animal, ready to fight for his life against impossible odds. He was surrounded. But the lions weren't behaving like predators. They were behaving like children. Leo, the bold one, took a hesitant step forward. He let out a soft, questioning mew, a sound entirely too small for his oversized paws. He wasn't stalking Jasper. He was approaching him with a heartbreakingly gentle deference. He lowered his head and nudged the bobcat's flank with his nose. Not with force, but with a tender, searching pressure. Jasper flinched, his growl intensifying. But the attack he expected didn't come. Conrad and Beth stood frozen, watching from the safety of the viewing platform, their panic slowly giving way to a profound, heart-stopping confusion. What are they doing?" Beth breathed, her hand covering her mouth. Conrad didn't answer. He was watching the cub's eyes, and in them he saw it. It wasn't bloodlust. It was loneliness. It was a deep, aching need. They had been missing the warm, furry, comforting presence of their mother all afternoon. Their world had been empty and frightening. And then into their world had walked a warm, furry, comforting presence. It was smaller than their mother. It smelled a bit different, a bit more like pine needles and indignation, but it was feline. It was there. And in their simple, grief-stricken cub minds, they had made a spectacular, wonderful mistake. They thought Jasper was their mother. Amara, the gentle one, crept forward next. She started to purr, a deep, rumbling sound that was meant to be soothing. She lay down next to Jasper, tucking her head under his chin, a gesture of pure, unadulterated affection. Jasper's body was ramrod stiff. He was trapped, not by aggression, but by a suffocating, bewildering wave of love. Then Quito, the shy one, peeked out from behind Leo and, seeing that it was safe, shuffled forward and curled up against Jasper's back. Finally, Nia, the playful one, flopped down with a contented sigh, her head resting on Jasper's tail. Jasper was no longer just surrounded. He was engulfed. He was the small, grumpy center of a purring, nuzzling, cuddling pile of lion cubs. The low growl in his chest sputtered and died. His body, which had been rigid with terror, began to soften. The fur on his back slowly settled. He was still tense, his whiskey-colored eyes wide with utter disbelief, but the immediate threat had passed, replaced by something he had no instinct for. He was being hugged to death. Conrad felt a tear trace a path through the dust on his cheek. He let out a shaky breath he hadn't realized he'd been holding. Beside him, Beth was openly weeping, but her tears were of relief and wonder, not sorrow. "I don't believe it," she whispered. I don't believe it." For the next hour, the staff of the Yaverland Wildlife Sanctuary stood in silent, reverent awe, watching the most unlikely family portrait imaginable. Jasper, the solitary, cantankerous bobcat, remained pinned against the tree, a furry, living hot water bottle for 4 lonely lion cubs. His initial terror had melted away, replaced by a look of profound resignation, like a man who has unexpectedly found himself at a toddler's tea party and has decided the only course of action is to see it through. At one point, Leo began to groom Jasper's head with his big, raspy tongue. Jasper's eyes squeezed shut, not in pleasure, but in sheer, unadulterated endurance. He bore the sandpaper-like licks with the stoicism of a saint. The cubs snuggled closer, their collective purr a gentle engine of contentment. And then, the impossible happened. Conrad, who knew Jasper's sounds better than his own, heard it. A faint, almost imperceptible vibration. A low, hesitant rumble from deep within the bobcat's chest. Jasper was purring. It wasn't the confident, room-shaking purr of the lions. It was a rusty, creaky, out-of-practice sound, as if he were starting an old lawnmower that hadn't been used in years. But it was there. In the face of overwhelming mistaken affection, the old grump had surrendered. For a brief, magical moment, he wasn't just a misplaced bobcat. He was a mother. He was comfort. He was exactly what those sad little cubs needed. The spell was finally broken by the sound of the vet's truck returning. Dr. Evans radioed ahead. "Zola is awake. She's groggy, but she's fine. We're bringing her back to the enclosure's holding area." A new, more practical panic set in. They had to get Jasper out of there before Zola, in her post-anesthesia confusion, saw a strange cat cuddling with her babies. Conrad knew brute force was out of the question. Rushing in would terrify the cubs and Jasper, and could turn the situation tragic in an instant. He needed a lure. He needed the one thing that could override Jasper's newfound sense of maternal duty. "Beth," he said, his voice firm and clear, "go to the kitchen. Get the emergency salmon." Beth's eyes widened. The emergency salmon was a whole, beautiful fillet of Scottish salmon, reserved for the most extreme circumstances, like coaxing a snow leopard to take its medication. This, Conrad decided, qualified as an extreme circumstance. Minutes later, Beth returned, carrying the prized fish. The scent, rich and oily, wafted on the breeze. In the cuddle puddle, a pair of tufted ears twitched. Jasper's head, which had been lolling in a state of resigned acceptance, lifted. His nose wrinkled. His whiskey-colored eyes focused with an intensity that had been absent all afternoon. He had fulfilled his role as a surrogate mother, but the siren song of premium-grade fish was a call to his very soul. Conrad moved slowly to the edge of the enclosure, holding the salmon so the scent would carry. "Jasper," he called softly, "look what Conrad's got." Jasper carefully, almost reluctantly, began to detangle himself from the pile of cubs. The cubs let out little mews of protest, their warm pillow suddenly deserting them. Jasper gave one of them, Amara, a quick, almost apologetic lick on the nose, a gesture so out of character that Conrad nearly dropped the fish. Then, with his dignity fully restored, the bobcat trotted purposefully across the enclosure, slipped through a service hatch that Conrad had unlocked, and arrived at Conrad's feet, looking up as if to say, "I have endured much. I believe this is owed to me." Just as Jasper was safely secured, Zola was released back into the main habitat. The cubs, seeing their real mother, forgot all about their strange small substitute. They rushed to her with joyous yelps, and soon the family was a rolling, purring, happy mass of lion, their brief period of sadness already a fading memory. That evening, as the sun set, casting long shadows across the peaceful sanctuary, Conrad sat with Jasper. The bobcat was back in his own enclosure, meticulously cleaning his fur, trying to remove every last trace of lion scent. He had devoured the entire salmon with a focus that was both terrifying and impressive. Conrad didn't bring a sardine. He felt somehow that a grander gesture had already been made by both of them. He just sat there, sipping his tea, watching his old, grumpy friend. The incident, which had begun with heart-stopping fear, had ended in a moment of such profound and unexpected tenderness that it felt sacred. It was a testament to the fact that in the vast, complex web of life, connections can be forged in the most unlikely of circumstances. That kindness is a language even the most solitary creatures can understand. And that sometimes, all a lonely heart needs is the warmth of another, even if it's the wrong one. Conrad smiled. The story of the day the lions surrounded the bobcat would become a legend at Yeverland, a tale told to new keepers for years to come. It was a story about how a grumpy old bobcat, through no fault of his own, became a mother for an hour. And it was a memory that Conrad knew, with absolute certainty, would stay with him forever.